How can we solve the gender wage gap? The gender wage gap is an issue we often hear about in politics and the media. But what is it actually about? Do women really earn less than men? And if yes, why is that the case? The following video wants to explore some of the main reasons for the gender wage gap and highlight solutions to tackle them. When we are talking about the gender wage gap, we often actually mean the so-called conditional wage gap. But what exactly does that mean? The conditional wage gap is when a man and a woman in the exact same situation with the same circumstances receive different salaries. This gap is hard to uncover because most work contracts are private. The more significant problem we want to talk about here is the unconditional wage gap, which is when we consider that women often tend to work in different fields, work part-time, or leave work temporarily. Let's take a closer look at some potential reasons. To explore the problem, we need to go back to where many of its roots come from. From birth on, children are influenced by their environment. The way their family and their environment raises them has a big influence on their behavior, their interests, and their ambitions in the workplace. The way young girls and boys are treated plays a big role in their development. For solving the gender wage gap, this stage of development is very important, but we want to look at where we can systematically improve the conditions. So we skip forward to the time children spend in the education system. Education is not just a process that equips kids with the skills and knowledge for life, it also plays a crucial role in their social development. Research found that the educational system partly contributes to the gender wage gap because of the experiences girls and boys have in school. This is not a claim that teachers are part of the system that is trying to push children in gender-specific roles and jobs, but there are findings that in the way that is taught in schools, the way that we test students, and even the way teachers interact with them, lies often an unconscious bias. So how can we tackle these problems? Firstly, it's important to bring awareness to the issue. If society, and especially people involved in education, don't agree that this bias in the system exists, and believe the outcome, meaning our graduates, come through a fair system, then there won't be much change. Secondly, change needs to start at the root of the education system, where teachers get taught to teach. They should have a heightened sensitivity towards gender issues and find appropriate ways to address and counteract them. Also, the way teachers interact with students, encourage, evaluate, or lecture them should not be different for a male or female student. And thirdly, we should look through the education materials and if they have a gender bias. Why only talk about all the male physicists and not spend more time on, for example, Lise Meitner, who laid out the first theoretical explanation for nuclear fusion and gave the groundwork for Otto Hahn, who then discovered it in an experiment and received the Nobel Prize for chemistry. And beyond the materials, even the tests and exams easily contain a bias, which can influence the way girls and boys react to it and perform. For example, in Austria, the entrance examination for medical exams showed a significant gender bias. Even when women represented 59% of applicants, they only represented 50% of admitted students. Increased awareness, better education of teachers around gender attitudes, and unbiased education materials and exams aren't the only measures to solve our problem, but they will set a stable foundation. After going through the education system, the challenges for women continue. Although the amount of women receiving a higher level of education has been rising steadily over the past few decades, women are still less likely to work in higher and therefore better paid jobs than men. In Europe, it is a fact that the higher a position is ranking, the more likely it is that a man is working in that position. According to recent studies, the average of female managers is still less than 1/5. The two effects we observe here are the infamous glass ceiling, stopping women from progressing in their career, and the leaking pipeline effect, meaning that women don't fill enough middle management positions to form a stable pipeline for the top of the ladder. But what can we do about it? Probably one of the most controversial solutions to tackle the absence of women in higher positions is the concept of gender quotas. Under the concept of quotas, companies have to employ a minimum percentage of women in specific positions, which is decided by the government. Critiques argue that quotas are only treating the symptoms instead of tackling the core problem of gender differences. Nevertheless, quotas can be a quick cure to the problem of underrepresentation of women in higher positions. But they're not necessarily the best, and definitely not the only way to close.
Created using Powtoon.